What's going on, everyone? It's Riley, and today I'm here to give a review of the entire original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga series. Now, I know there's really no reason for me to do this right now. It's not like there's something that's going on, and it's an older series at this point from, mid to late 90s. So I'm a little late on this, and if I'm being honest, my full exposure to the series, my first time reading the entire manga wasn't until last year. So I've had a year to ruminate on this, and I think it's well overdue for me to do this review. Now, the series is definitely one that pretty much anyone is at least aware of. If you're into anime, you're into manga, then you've probably seen some of one of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, read one of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, or at the very least, you've probably watched Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series on YouTube. Whatever the case may be, everyone has some sort of exposure to this, especially if you are a fan of this kind of stuff. For me, my initial exposure was one year when I was in middle school, and I went to a birthday party of one of my best friends, and I had never played the series or played the card game before, but he had a bunch of the cards and was showing them to everyone, and he had enough for us to maybe split it into 2 decks, and his mom noticed everyone trying to play with his little stack of cards and was like, hey guys, let's go to the store, I'll buy everyone a few packs, and you guys can play. And it was super awesome thing that she did, and it was a great time. Everyone got to make their own little decks and play against each other, and we watched some of the anime as it came on that Saturday morning. And that really started my initial appreciation for the series. I would go on to play the card game for at least the next couple years, collecting some of the cards here and there. But I never had a really deep or profound relationship with the series at that point. So I would watch some of the anime as well. Like I mentioned, it was on TV, and that's probably what a lot of us would see, is just episodes of that. And I became aware of the characters and the story and what was going on. And then a little bit later, the manga started to be published in the Shonen Jump magazine, the monthly magazine that was put out starting, I think, August 2003. Now, the difference there, though, was that in the magazine, they were showing material that was from before the anime, material that in the West, we had never seen before. So this was really intriguing, because it was unknown material, number one, and number two, this is material that had nothing to do with the cards, had nothing to do with Duel Monsters. So it was really interesting to see this. Now, in America, they did split the manga into 3 different parts. That original part that I was just talking about, as far as the anime goes, a lot of times it's called Season 0. In the manga, the Western English adaptation manga, it was just called Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, to differentiate that from the part where it's all about Duel Monsters, when they published that part where they go to Duelist Kingdom and the Battle City arcs, which I'll talk about more in a second, they called that part Duelist, and it was not published within the Shonen Jump Monthly magazine. Duelist was outside of the magazine, was published bi-monthly or whatever the schedule was for that, which was a genius marketing move for them, because that allowed them to focus on the material that the American audiences were not yet familiar with. So after they finished that Season 0 material, the pre-Duel Monsters material, they skipped past Battle City and Duelist Kingdom, and they went straight to the last arc, which they titled Yu-Gi-Oh! Millennium World, in a 3rd series. So we have Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Millennium World. Now, that wound up being published in the magazine itself, and I read most of that in the magazine when it was coming out. I didn't read all of it, though, because I stopped reading the magazine after a while, and just collecting the physical volumes, the individual books. So, if you're watching the video, you're probably familiar with what the story of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, but for some reason, if you're not, if you're watching this because you're interested in what I have to say about it, or whatever brought you here, I'll explain kind of a synopsis of the series, and I'll try to go quickly and kind of go over it so that I can talk more about my feelings on it than just what happens. The first part, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Season 0, as it gets known in the anime, focuses on kind of the exposition of this world and of these characters. We're introduced to Yugi Muto, a kind of diminutive kid, smaller than all the other kids in his class, who is a real nerd when it comes to games. He loves playing different games and puzzles and stuff like that, and he's building it's the Millennium Puzzle, but at the time it's just this weird upside-down pyramid with an eye on it. You don't really know what it is. And once he finishes building it, it unlocks this kind of alternate personality within Yugi that is a lot more mature and darker, and we wind up calling it Yami Yugi, not knowing what that personality's real name is. The series then introduces a lot of the other characters that we'll know throughout the rest of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, such as Yugi's friends, who are initially bullies but wind up becoming friends of his. And I'm going to use the American anime names, not the Japanese names here, like Joey and Tristan, and we get his, the kind of crush that he has on this girl named Taya. She's introduced. We have the new kid, Bakura, come in, who's kind of mysterious. We have the mysterious Shadi, not a student, but another character that winds up actually being important way later on in the series. And then we have Seto and Mocha Bakaiba are introduced as well. So we get all of the main cast of characters, and the first part of the series is really just a bunch of various games and stuff that Yugi and Yami Yugi wind up playing against people. And they introduce the concept of the Shadow Realm in this early part. And the Shadow Realm is basically whoever faces against Yugi in a duel or in a game, if they lose, they get sent to the Shadow Realm, which is supposed to be a fate worse than death. The death worse than death, I think is how it's described. They are brain dead zombies, essentially, if they lose. So it's pretty dark. The end of that first part kind of brings everything together and introduces, and I'm skipping over some stuff because there's several little arcs throughout the first part. The end of the first part is a larger arc that involves kind of a Dungeons and Dragons type RPG tabletop adventure game where all the characters are kind of facing against this, it's hosted by Bakura, and there's something going on there that's a little bit dark, a little bit different with Bakura. And all the characters are facing against some certain mysterious adversary. And that kind of comes together to give us an idea of who Bakura is as the series goes forward. We don't know for sure, we don't really know anything about him solid, but there's something going on with that kid. So the Season 0 stuff ends, then we get into, like I said, what's called Duelist. And this is the part that most people are going to be familiar with. This is the Duelist Kingdom arc, and the Dungeon Dice Monster arc, and the Battle City arc. At this point, the series completely changes focus towards Duel Monsters, which is the card game that we're all familiar with. If you're a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh!, you know about the cards. And Duel Monsters, essentially, two people, typically two people, go into a duel against each other. They have a certain amount of life points. They put monsters down, the monsters attack each other, and whoever loses all of their life points loses the game. Now, the game becomes the big thing in the series. At the beginning of the series, this is what everyone cares about. Everyone's playing this game. Everyone's dueling each other. Everyone has their cards, there's rare cards and whatever. And Yugi's grandpa, Solomon in the anime, happens to be a owner of a game shop. And so that kind of feeds into Yugi's obsession with games and puzzles and all that stuff. And he happens to have a lot of really rare cards, namely Exodia the Forbidden One. He becomes targeted by people, and eventually something happens where the creator of Duel Monsters seems to have placed Solomon into some danger and summons Yugi and his friends to come into this tournament on his private island, Duelist Kingdom. And this leads into that first major arc with Duel Monsters. Now, that goes into its whole tournament. We get introduced to a ton of new characters, a ton of characters that are recurring throughout the rest of the series. And I'm, again, using the American names. We get Pegasus, we get My Valentine, Bandit Keith, Weevil Underwood, Rex Raptor, Mako Tsunami, a bunch of those characters, and some others are thrown in there as well. And it's a big tournament, and we see that play through, and it kind of introduces the concepts of Duel Monsters in that arc. And I'll go back to kind of that stuff in a second. Now, the next arc would be Dungeon Dice Monsters, just kind of a reprieve from the main Duel Monsters aspect of the series before we go into Battle City, which for my money is, and I'm sure a lot of people agree, the greatest part of the series. In this arc, everything starts coming to a head. Everything that we've learned about these mysterious items like Yugi's puzzle, Maximilian Pegasus's eye, the Millennium items as we come to find they're known, their purpose comes to be known, and we're introduced to a lot of big concepts and new characters like Isis and Merrick Ishtar, and we're introduced to the Egyptian god cards. So the stakes are really risen in the Battle City tournament. And of course, this is a game, or this is a series about games, so every major arc is basically going to be a big tournament. So similar to the Duelist Kingdom, we see the characters running around Battle City and fighting against various strong duelists who are trying to defeat them and take their most valuable cards. But there's something bigger at stake here, and that's kind of what drives the intrigue and drives the action in this arc. And then finally, the third part of the series, like I mentioned, Millennium World, brings it all together and brings all of the ancient Egyptian aspects to the forefront and throws our characters into ancient Egypt to kind of see the past of what Duel Monsters is actually based on, and who their kind of ancestors, if you will, are, and see these ancient Egyptian versions of the characters that we're familiar with, like Yugi and Kaiba and all those guys. It wraps it up pretty well in a decent way, you know, kind of takes all the stuff that we knew and throws it all together and says, here you go. But it's not quite as intriguing as the earlier stuff, especially from Battle City. So that's a good synopsis. I know I spent a little bit of extra time doing that just to kind of give an idea of everything that happens in the series. Now, what I really want to focus on, though, is what makes this series great. What makes this series actually worthwhile? Because on the surface level, you're just like, oh, it's a manga about kids playing cards. And that's kind of the joke that if you watch Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series, it's always, they kind of lampoon the idea that everyone takes this so seriously when in reality it's just a kid's card game. But it's the way that this stuff is written that makes it really work. In the Duelist Kingdom arc, you get this really good introduction to Duel Monsters. You're kind of introduced to the ideas of the monster cards and the concepts of the monsters having to fight against each other. But as each battle goes, the game becomes more technical and more complex as they introduce more types of cards, monsters with effects attached to them, trap cards, magic cards, environmental effect cards, and stuff like that. And each duel becomes more and more interesting because these characters are now kind of forced to learn how to be more creative and more constructive in the ways that they use the cards in their deck to fight against these challenges, these increasing challenges as they go forward through the arc. Now, of course, there's stakes to the game. Yugi has to win because if he doesn't, then something happens with his grandfather. And of course, there's other things involved as well. But at the surface of it, it's all about the challenge that you see between these characters. And that's something that I kind of stepped outside of the series when I was reading it, and I thought, obviously there's no real chance involved in this. If you're actually playing a card game, there's a lot of chance involved in what card you're going to draw, and looking at that and the idea of how to strategize in that game. And that's why playing these types of card games are always exciting and fun for people, because it's all about developing a great strategy that you can use with your specific deck that you built. And of course, in a show or in a manga, anything that's scripted, the creator has decided and preordained who is going to win and how they're going to win. But that, I think, is a lot of what shows you how good of a writer someone is of course every writer knows exactly what's going to happen, and everything in any sort of form of fiction is preordained, but it's how they suspend your disbelief and have you kind of step outside and realize, this is a fictional world, and the excitement behind seeing how the character gets to that success, how they defeat their opponent. Of course, if you're watching Dragon Ball Z, Akira Toriyama knows that he wants for Goku and the gang to beat Frieza. But it's not so much just that they beat Frieza, but the way that Frieza becomes beaten. What cards are up Goku's sleeves, so to say, that will allow him to defeat his opponent. And that's kind of the same thing that we have here. It's all about what kind of challenges are Yugi and his friends going to face from the antagonistic duelists that they go up against? And how are they going to use the cards that are at their disposal, even in the most dire of situations where it seems like they can't possibly win, to get that victory, to clinch that victory? Each duel, as I mentioned, kind of goes further into the development of how the game is played. By the time you get to Battle City, it becomes a lot more complex in the way that the game is being played. You have various cards that have such intricate and strong abilities that you wind up questioning, how can anyone possibly beat this card? It seems almost as if Takahashi has written the protagonist into a corner, not allowing them to possibly win, especially when you're in Battle City, when they've introduced the 3 god cards, which are meant to be these unbeatable behemoth titan monsters. Yet you're thrown into these situations where you're sitting there following these characters who are trying to fight against them. And this is leading towards one of the moments in the series where I really had to step out and think, man, this is ridiculous. Like, this series, it truly, and I mean that in the best way possible, is truly ludicrous. Literally, when you get to a point where you're reading and there's a page where Kaiba claims that he's going to defeat God, I had to put the book down and think, I am absolutely loving this, but this is just crazy. And I think that that's another testament to how well it's written, because the series jumps the shark so many times, and even bigger ridiculous things happen as it goes forward. But only when I force myself to step outside of that series and step outside of enjoying this material do I really realize how ridiculous it is. Because Takahashi writes the series so well that you don't really question the ridiculous things that happen. It's just part of the series. It's just part of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just part of what happens. And I think that that's kind of what makes it so great, is that it is ridiculous. It is this fantastic game that's played with, you step outside of it and you're looking and you're like, this is just a kid's card game. But it's so much more than that when you're invested in it. And I think he does such a wonderful job as a creator to pull you into the series in the same way that the characters are pulled into it. And you really identify and feel for what they feel and understand what's going on through their eyes. As lame as that might sound, but it's true. That's really what makes the series work. And I think that's a lot of why I came to love the series. I read the series in its entirety just about a year ago. So it was way down the line that I finally decided to invest myself, my time and my money into this series. And the only reason that I really picked all of it up and decided I wanted to read it was because I made a small goal for myself to buy every series that was in the monthly Shonen Jump magazine. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Was one of the only ones that I had not read in its entirety. So I knew that I needed to get on that. And I had read parts of it, like I mentioned before, but I never read the entire thing. I knew the plot, as most of us do, and for me it was because of the various episodes of the manga, or episodes of the anime that I'd watched, and also from watching most of the abridged series. But the abridged series had given me this kind of expectation of, I don't know, kind of a lower expectation for the series. I thought going into it that I would enjoy it enough, but, it's not anything special. Especially because it is kind of aged at this time, and maybe it was something bigger back when it first came out, but now, reading it in 2019, it's, it is what it is. My expectations were shattered. I had such, I don't even want to say low, I had such middling expectations going into it, but when I really got into it and started reading it and getting into the major arcs and all of these duels, it was just as exciting as any other shonen manga. Any shonen battle manga like One Piece or Naruto that you read and you get hyped up whenever these big fights happen. Or even sports series like Slam Dunk, which was one of the hardest series for me to put down because it was so exciting. I had that same level of hype in reading Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is something I never expected to find. Never. At all did I ever expect to find that with Yu-Gi-Oh! So I happily admit that I was wrong there. And I have been speaking the praises for this series ever since, letting everyone know, please read this thing, because it is definitely worthwhile. So I'm really doing this video right now kind of for 2 reasons. Number one, I want to explain my feelings for this series and why I have the feelings that I do, and kind of my history with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, why I'm a fan of it and how big of a fan I am. Not really how big of a fan, but how much I love this series and its characters. And in hopes that by me expressing this, that I can maybe convince someone who, like myself, didn't have very high expectations for the series to check it out on their own. And there's so many avenues. You don't have to buy the manga physically. You can read it online. You can go onto the Shonen Jump app and subscribe to that, and it's available for you to read there. there's so many avenues to read it, and I highly recommend it. Or watch the anime. One of the things. But number 2, and the main reason I wanted to make this video now, is because I'm going to be making another Yu-Gi-Oh! Related video to talk about my favorite character in the entire original franchise, and who I think is the greatest duelist in the series. And I have to say just the original series, not any of the spin-off series, but my favorite character and the greatest duelist in the original series, Joey Wheeler. A lot of people are probably banging their fists on the table right now, angry at me, and you can sound off in the comments below if you disagree. But if you're familiar with the series, you probably know exactly what kind of stuff I'm going to be citing in this video to talk about why Joey is the greatest duelist. And I am very excited to make that video. And if you disagree with me, let me know, because I'm hoping that I can provide not evidence to turn anyone's opinion. If you're more of a Kaiba stan or a fan of Yugi and think that they're the best, or anyone else in the series is a greater duelist than Joey, then by all means, that's your opinion. But I'm here to preach the gospel of Joey Wheeler in an upcoming video. So I hope that you're as excited about watching it as I am to make it. I want to express that, and I felt like I had to kind of talk about the series itself first before jumping into my diatribe about Joey himself. So here we go. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Whoever you are watching this, I really appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative, and I hope maybe it convinces you, if you haven't already read this great series yet, to go out there and try it out for yourself, because I wholeheartedly and totally recommend it. There's a lot of changes coming to this channel, not bad changes at all good things, as I'm trying to use my free time to create better and more sufficient content, and more content in general for this channel. So I'll be taking this a lot more seriously in the coming months and the entire future of the project here on this YouTube channel. So I hope that you are ready for that, and I hope that you are invested in my channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please think about doing so, because I'm excited to share all the stuff that's going to be happening as it starts popping up. You can probably already tell I'm using a different camera with a different mic, so I can make higher quality videos. I'm putting new edits in to make things look nicer and just be more intriguing and look better to the eye. So I'm hoping that that's appreciated. Anyway, again, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment down below with anything you want to say to me about if you think I'm wrong for thinking Joey's the greatest duelist, whoever your favorite duelist is, whatever your favorite cards are and your favorite monsters in the series are, please talk to me about it down below. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, all that stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out, stay healthy, stay safe. We'll see you soon.